Okay, hello, Professor. It is me, Diego.
Hello, it's me, Gustavo.
Hey, Professor, it's me, Lily.
And we are here in the Holly dorm at CSUF, beginning to record our interview project. We are very excited to show you what we cooked here in the studio today. But yeah, it says here on the sample breakdown, we're supposed to speak for a minute for this introduction, but we don't really got much to talk about, so we're just gonna hop right into the first interview, which will be my interview. So Gustavo's gonna go ahead and be my interview guy, and I'm gonna go ahead and answer the questions. So here he goes.
His name is Diego. He's 18 and a first year here at Cal State Fullerton. He's a cinema and TV major. He does TikTok on the side as a hobby and really likes video games. In the future, he hopes to pursue a career in acting and maybe continue to do social media on the side. He has a pretty big passion for writing and English in general, and feels like discussing ethics studies can act as a great lens to better writing.
Yeah, that's me, Lokes. It's almost like I wrote that. That's crazy. No.
Thank you.
All right. So you want to ask me the first question?
Yeah. From the Obando and Topete reading and the podcast, how does practice-based research allows us to practice the methods of ethics studies?
Yeah. So, all right. So I feel like it's important to first examine what is exactly practice-based research, right? If we plan to analyze how it affects our ability to practice methods of ethnic studies, I think that's important. So first, through discussions of the podcast as well as our readings, we discussed how critical involvement from the community was and still very much is practice-based research and functions as the foundation of ethnic studies. The information extracted through fighting against systemic racism is very crucial when implementing ethnic studies in our own lives. As mentioned in class, ethnic studies is nothing if not personally woven in our own lives and our own uses. It functions it functions as just another abstract concept without active participation from members of the community. And speaking of community, another example of practice-based research would be artistic expression. This can help individuals navigate the intersection of culture and creativity, as well as contribute to the preservation and awareness just overall within the community using ethnic studies, right? And finally, I think a lot of our reading mentioned the action of, engaging in advocacy and policy work, a lot of political work and such stuff like that, which is something I feel like young adults tend to dismiss altogether. However, it is very vital. It is very important to get engaged into policy work that kind of addresses the issues of racial and ethnic inequality, since it's so prevalent, I feel like, in our society. But honestly, it doesn't have to be just storming the White House. It could mean anything from working with advocacy organizations, government agencies, or even having group discussions to bring about social change through, research-informed initiatives. But in all of the three examples that I just mentioned, like art and policy work and just in general activism, I feel like practice-based research in ethnic studies enables individuals to not only study the field academically, but also engage with and contribute to the communities and issues that we're studying, therefore gaining a more comprehensive and genuine understanding of ethnic studies, methods, and overall principles.
Yeah. So the next question is from our discussion of
Ferguson's.
Thank you. Reorder of things and the agent of change. How does the seed planted by students, activists, reveals the critiques, argument, and insight of activism that can continue to help me out here. Cultivate ethics studies methods.
Well, in general, I'd argue that students tend to provide just a fresh take on any field of study that they kind of hop into. Oftentimes, due to new waves and generational perspectives that veterans just, typically don't pick up on. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just that young people tend to have a different perspective based on the generation that they were born and raised in. And that's just how life will always be, But as mentioned in the Agents of Change documentary, foundations as early as the 70s were created to implement activism in the community to fight against, the relentless discrimination that many discriminated groups faced back in the 70s, earlier than the 70s, obviously, as we've seen through America's history. But even in today's society, a lot of people still face discrimination, and we need foundations to fight against that. Do you know what I mean? And I believe what Ferguson mentioned throughout the essay is how these foundations were started and formed through groups of student activists, like the United Mexican American Association, the Mexican American Student Association, the MECA, I believe, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Atizlan. Sorry for the Spanish butchering there. But while other students in San Antonio founded the Mexican American Youth Association, or MAYO, and I believe it's because these students had such a willingness and drive to have a better future in society, and that goal to live in a place where they can feel safe and they can have a better, more informed way of living. It's because of that these groups were able to be founded. And it's through this and many other aspects in life that newer, younger, and more eager voices are able to plant the seed and tend to provide a more valuable insight into their fields of study.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with that. For the next question is, how does spirit restoration formulate strategy, ethics, and ways of being that fight for and hold onto previous knowledge of ethics studies?
Yeah, so during week 10 and week 11, we read from this author named Tijerina Revilla. I believe that's how you pronounce it, I'm not too positive. But we listened to 2 episodes of the Alchemist Manifesto as well. Shout out, Professor Londo. I honestly think I learned a lot from the concept of spirit restoration. I genuinely have never heard of this topic before, but I believe what spirit restoration boils down to is the rebuilding of one's soul and spirit, right? It's a concept that I believe is so important to teach young adults, as many of them unknowingly have had their spirit murdered by a multitude of different sources in their life. The murder of a spirit can come from suppression of one's self-expression, creativity, or their voice. And as Tijerina Revilla describes in her essay, Attempted Spirit Murder, we all once had a fully whole spirit, right? And it's that younger version of ourselves that had a dream job. That dream job, whether I remember when I was young, I wanted to own a restaurant that had vampires in it. But whatever. For everyone, it's a different topic. But in general, it wasn't until the weight of negativity from outside sources in the real world, I believe, came to us that we lost sight of that dream. And it's a topic that she explores in her essay. But I believe that through healing your inner child, we can grow to fight for our morals, right? Morals that lie in tangent with the knowledge gathered through ethnic studies. And I think it's because one must heal themselves before healing others. As we have come to know that people in marginalized groups tend to face endless discrimination from genuinely any number of aspects in ourselves and our identity. And we have to find spirit protectors to save us from the murders of our spirit, right? These protectors, as Tijerina Revilla suggests, can be as simple as self-confidence and self-love. But as self-assuredness, these concepts like self-confidence and self-love are such powerful weapons that we don't necessarily have to go out and find. We can just find it within ourselves. Because self-assuredness functions as such a powerful weapon against the white supremacy's greatest threat, which is internalized spirit murder. The self-destruction of value, worth, and dignity is planted in many marginalized communities, and without the proper spirit protectors and tools to combat the white supremacy, society could very well be facing a spiritual genocide, which is what Tijerina kind of discusses in her essay. And I think that spiritual genocide is a very horrifying possibility, but a very real possibility in American society, I feel, without the proper tools. However, I believe, on a more lighter note, right, I believe that as long as we stay in community and in awareness, and honestly, most importantly, non-complacent, then we will continuously have the strength to fight against like the persistent attacks on our spirit made from institutions inside and outside of education.
Yeah. So our next question is from our course material to students not currently enrolled in our class. What will you present to them as a glimpse of an importance of ethics studies?
For sure. Out of all the things I think we watched, we read, we listened to in our course thus far, I genuinely could not choose between Valentine Road and Rhymes for Young Ghouls. Only because they were my absolute favorite. I remember watching Rhyme for Young Ghouls with my roommate, and it was genuinely such like an interesting take that I've never really seen before. I feel like a lot of the times Indigenous women are depicted in media as being like helpless and having to be saved by the white man. I mean, we all have seen Pocahontas, and we've all like gone through that. And we've all like seen that movie, and I feel like it's this narrative that Indigenous women cannot save themselves. So I thought it was a really interesting take on how institutionalized systems of racism kind of put down people of Indigenous cultures, right? That is a very real thing. However, in Rhymes for Young Ghouls, we see that in this narrative, she takes her fate and her revenge in her own hands, which I think is very empowering for young Indigenous women watching the film. And just in general, I loved I'm a cinematography major, like a cinema major, and I really like movies and stuff. So I just thought the cinematography was so beautiful. And just the writing in general, I really appreciated the film. But Valentine Road, I feel like it's a tie between that as well, because genuinely the story of that, like with Larry, and the man, or the boy he confessed to, I just think it's a very heartbreaking story. But I mean, I guess Rhymes for Young Ghouls takes the cake for me, but I will say that Valentine Road was a very close second, and I think both of those, if you were to show those to students not taking the course, they'd understand the importance of why ethnic studies is so vital to study, right? And it's that idea of being able to take your fate into your own hands, and you don't necessarily have to wait for large institutions to fight for you. Because in Valentine Road, we see that community acts as a good weapon against discrimination. But not only that, we see that in Rhymes for Young Ghouls, you can take your own, like as long as you have a community that provides love and can provide that support for you, you don't necessarily have to wait for people in positions of power to fight for you. You can do it yourself.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a mixture with those two. It's pretty good. In comparison to, and our next question, in comparison to the society written about in the readings, and are there any noticeable changes made in our current day as a result of the implementation of the methods and information found in ethics studies?
Yeah, certainly, I do believe so. But I think more prominently, out of all the marginalized groups, I think we see in our society a large change in how current day society versus the society that we read through in the books, how they view the LGBTQ community. I think that the time periods that we studied had a much different view, and I believe institutions now have a much more different view on queer people. I would attest this, however, to the large change to be due to the commercialization and ability to capitalize off of queer identity. Now, I believe the movement in mainstream media kind of started in the early 2000s. For me personally, at least that's where I kind of took note of it. And it functions like a double-edged sword of sorts, in my opinion, right? I think, although it's wonderful that society has become desensitized, appreciate it, Lily. I could not read that word for the life of me. In general, like queer folk are being more normalized, right, in society. Simply their existence and just being a part of that community, it comes with the spotlight that garners negative attention as well as positive. I mean, I know I just mentioned Valentine Road, but having an open identity is not always met with positivity, as we saw in that documentary. And it is always, like, there's always the danger that it could very well be met with violence and discrimination, right? It's like real that we have to deal with that. So although, like, I feel that society has moved past the days of, shunning queer people, and it's through the power of ethnic studies and through the movements and practice-based research that people in the LGBTQ community, veterans, kind of pioneered the space that we have now. We're no longer in those shunning days. However, I do believe that hatred and the violence towards members of the LGBTQ community are still met with is very rampant in today's society. I don't think it's gone. However, I believe that it'll be through the further implementation of ethnic studies, the knowledge that we garner from it, and the activism that society can grow closer to a more informed and tolerant state, just in general.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, that concludes my interview, but we will now be moving on to Gus's interview.
Hey y'all, it's Lily. I'm gonna be interviewing Gus. Hey y'all, it's just Professor. This is Gustavo.
Hello.
He is a sophomore here at Cal State Fullerton. He is majoring in mechanical engineering, and he is the firstborn of 3. Obviously a proud Hispanic first-generation student here. Also part of a fraternity here on campus that has really helped him come out of his shell and just be the person he wants to be in life. He's a person who loves to socialize and create great and sometimes even bad memories, just to live life in the moment and live life at its fullest. He hopes to pursue his career as an Imagineer Universal. That is so cool.
No, Imagineer or at Universal.
Oh, Imagineer or something at Universal. I got it. Okay. So our first question is, using 3 to 5 examples from the Hablando en Topete reading and podcasts, how does practice-based research allow us to practice the methods of ethnic studies?
Well, practice-based research allow us to practice methods of ethnic study as it brings up the idea of what it is and work from there. As we intend to just think about it as one singular thing, not really giving much thought into it, but in reality, it's more about awareness and what could be done to change history. That's to not repeat history over and over again. We can change that and stop that from happening. As you go on in more deeper into the real history that hasn't been brought up, you get a better understanding of it. It helps widen the field to be more aware rather than just being ignorant about it. An example being about the documentaries and reading, as we see the struggle and challenges they face as they must join in for a cause in order to stop it. Switching it up for different methods to students that way that it can be taught and understood in different ways is helpful, because some of them are visual learners and hands-on learners.
Alrighty. So from our discussion of Ferguson's reorder of things and agents of change, how do you think the seeds planted by student activists reveal the critiques, arguments, and even insights of activism that can continue to cultivate ethnic study methods? What do you think?
Yeah, the seeds planted in by the student activists creates a more diverse environment as they open up their views to different perspectives. Understanding rather than judging, as many like to judge before even understanding the full picture of somebody. As we go beyond it's going beyond yourself. In the new community, as stated with the schools, that they already limit themselves to reaching that bar high up, basically trying to achieve greatness in specific attributes. So it's difficult to break through that from a different culture. With the method being used that they are by the elements used from their past, as we still continue to formulate those methods that we don't let go unheard of, but put yourself out there as shown in the agent of change, as we see how they face their problems and they want to overcome it and keep moving forward.
Okay, sick. That was a really good response. I felt that. Alrighty. I know it was a while ago, but from about week 10 and 11 and those materials, if you remember well, how does spirit restoration formulate strategies, ethics, and ways of being that fight for and hold on to the previous knowledge of ethnic studies? What do you think about that?
Well, spirit restoration is the healing of one's spirit, basically like
Okay.
your ego, or not really your ego, but your internal self.
Okay.
Literally in the name spirit, yeah.
Yeah.
From protecting yourself is from the spirit murders. Those are the negative from people, that being the racism or discrimination, anything that negatively going towards you. And the formulate strategy to be greater and help others. So you have to heal yourself to heal others in order to overcome the backlash and discrimination due to our race. As we struggle to fit in a society that we are not welcome in, and we have to find our spirit protectors, that being yourself or someone you can look up to that can trust from a spirit murderer. That we all have our differences and struggles, but that's what brings us together to fight our beliefs and stand up for the community. By restoring ourselves, we can help others restore themselves, and they can help others, keeping this trend going on and spreading throughout the community.
Okay, I like it. Alrighty. Two more questions left. If you had to show a piece of media, like a documentary, a podcast, maybe an article you read, or something that touched you from our course material, to students that are not currently enrolled in our class, what would you present to them as a glimpse into the importance of ethnic studies?
That's a good question. A glimpse that I will show to people who haven't taken this class will be the documentary on the precision of knowledge, the fight for ethics studies, as it really demonstrates how these kids were standing up to this class going, because they were fighting for this. It's a community that they formulated into the class. And as the government is trying to drop the class because they see it as an anti-American, hurting their image, as one would say, saying that we have to have pride in America, that we shouldn't have teach different classes in a certain way just because of your background, that everything has to be so in an American image. That's what they wanted it. But in the community, they didn't want that. They wanted to be somewhere where they can feel safe and accepted. Because as a Hispanic, some kids are not welcomed into schools as they are seen less.
Right.
Yeah. But as I said, but as you see in the documentary, they protest and stood up for what they believe in. As for them, it's just not a class, but an environment to feel welcome into. As many grow in a community where they all may not fit in, there's one place they can all call home, and that's that. With that in mind, they want to make sure this continues and is passed down to other generations, as they don't want the other generations to feel the same way as they did. They want them to have that opportunity. In the end, they weren't successful, but however, they didn't give up, and even with the odds against them, they didn't stop. You see how important it is to them as they say their final goodbyes in class, showing how much this class has impacted them and embraced them for being themselves.
I didn't really think of it like that. That's really good thought. All right. Last question. In comparison to the society written about in the readings, do you think there are any noticeable reformations or changes made in the current day as a result of the implementation of the methods and information found in ethnic studies?
Yeah, there has been some notable changes in our current society and how people take a stand. Not only are the approaches different, but also in involvement as well. Within the year, it slowly grew for people involvement, but now with the internet, it's more broader and a whole new level for everybody to be involved. As we develop with the media, more support and more awareness is spread around faster and efficiently. And although, as we look back, the movements were more unionized and collective, and they were risky, but now with the internet, the community comes to you together and to stand up. But with the internet, it's much more broader and easier, so it's much more easier to get together. Because the movements were made with that, and the supporters, followers come through. As example explained was during COVID. During COVID, there was many supports coming out for different like the Black Lives Matter movement, and then more came out, and that's where it started to get more progressively better. Yeah.
Okay, I get that. Well, good. Thank you so much for answering those questions for me.
Yeah.
All right, it's Lily's turn, Professor. Oh, okay. So her name is Lily Moina.
Yeah, that's
Awesome. Well, Liliana Moina, but no one calls her Liliana. People just call her Lily. It is her first year here at Fullerton, and she's doing her best to figure out how things work out here. She is majoring in cultural anthropology and hopes to travel the world and learn all there is to learn about people and way of life. In her life, she wants to experience life for what it truly is and figure out how to experience everything it has to offer. That sounds great, twin. Okay, so first and foremost, we're just gonna hop into the first question. Yeah, sound good? Okay, so from the Obando and Topete reading and podcast, how does practice-based research allow us to practice the methods of ethnic studies?
Okay, I broke it down a little bit, and I think if I really think about it, what is practice-based research as a whole? So I think my personal interpretation of practice-based research is, I think it's a hands-on learning experience, and it's being actively engaging in learning. And in ethics studies, we use this type of research to not only further our knowledge, but even deepen our knowledge. And by applying the methods that we learn from reading books, from understanding stories, and watching informational videos, we get some sort of a more personal connection with what we're trying to understand. And that personal connection is what is really making someone want to further their knowledge. Having a connection with something makes you want to not let it go. Initially, practice-based research allows us to practice the methods of ethnic studies by getting personal with our emotions, our thoughts, and how we process all types of information. Now, I do know that Diego did touch on this earlier in our interview, but I'm only touching on it again to really focus on, honestly, how important it is. And it's not only important to you who is doing the research and understanding the information, but it's also important to learn this information to everyone else in society, and everyone else who is going to be affected by this knowledge.
100%. I genuinely think, like, instead of just reading the stuff that we have to do in class, it's so much more effective when we can have a personal connection with it,
right,
and when we can implement it in our lives.
Exactly.
So 100% agree. Now, when it comes to Ferguson's Reorder of Things and the Agents of Change documentary that we watched, how do you believe that seeds planted by student activists, much like ourselves, I feel, right?
Yeah, of course.
How do you think those seeds reveal the critiques, arguments, and insights of activism that can continue to cultivate ethnic study methods?
So I broke it down again just because it's easier for me to see that way, and it's easier for me to understand
100%.
what I'm talking about if it's just broken down and figured out what I'm really being asked.
Yeah.
So the seeds are obviously a metaphor. The seeds are duh. It's a metaphor for wanting and learning and gaining knowledge. It's planting something, and when you plant a seed, you expect it to grow and become something beautiful or something either completely different from what you've planted.
100%.
I think it's the knowledge that gets planted in your brain, and it's the spark of interest that you get from finding a subject that is so interesting to you and having what you want or what you need to learn more about that specific subject. Like for me, it was anthropology and learning about cultures, and coming to a school where I could take these classes that I'm actually interested in, where I would spend my time at doing what I want. And that time that I spent doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like it's something that I have to do. It's like I'll wake up, I'll go to class, and I feel like I want to do my homework because it's something that I'm interested about learning, especially in this class as well. And I also think as you gain more knowledge, the more you want to learn and the more you will grow as a person and honestly as an activist. And that is where, as a student activist, you start to learn how to find other people searching for their way in life. And you start figuring out what people are interested in. You start figuring out why people want to learn certain things. And you start learning how to plant your new knowledge into their brain, their own seeds, so they can become more better people, or just more informed as a whole. And I think that is what activism is.
Yeah.
It's taking action, it's wanting to be there, it's applying yourself and actually wanting to make a difference, not only in the people who are interested, but not only in the people who are interested, not only in the people who are like you, but everyone else as a whole. It's everyone else in society. It's everyone else that needs to know this information and simply aren't as knowledgeable.
100%. And like, I thought that was a really interesting point that you brought up, how it really comes from a point of like sparking one's own interest. Like, you're obviously not going to be so dedicated to a subject that you don't care about.
Exactly.
And what's really important when talking about ethnic studies is that you can't just like read ethnic studies without empathy or without a connection, or else it's just like there's no use, there's no point. You have to find involvement. And I 100% get what you're saying.
And it's like, when people are saying that it's just as simple as what it is, it's like, yes, it's simple, but it's just as powerful, if not more powerful. It's
100%.
like more people are being affected by this, you know? There are classes for it now. These are the things that are mattering in our lives.
No, literally. So moving on to the next question to keep this train of thought going. In week 10 and 11, which I know is a while now, but like we discussed like spirit restoration, right? And like how spirit restoration could formulate strategies and ethics and ways of being that can fight for and hold on to previous knowledge in ethnic studies. So how do you think spirit restoration adds on to that?
I am going to do it once more time. I'm going to break it down.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's just how I learn. That's just how my brain works.
Yeah.
And it works really well for me, at least. But something I'm gonna start with, what is spirit? Spirit as a whole, what does it mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean to have a spirit? What does it mean to have a soul? And as I see it, I think having a spirit is who you are. It is your being. It is what makes you you, whoever that may be. So when you are so physically or mentally or even emotionally affected, or honestly, and to be so real, when you're so hurt like that, it can really affect your soul, and it can change how you act. It can change how you treat other people. It can change how you receive input from other people. It can change how you see the world. It can change your perspectives.
And you know, we were having a discussion earlier before we started the interview about how like we feel that the institution of Christianity and Catholicism kind of can really break down and suppress one's spirit. How do you feel about that?
I think, I think that's a great topic, and we do talk about that a lot in ethnic studies, because that is a big part of the culture. Yeah. That is how I was raised. Yeah. That is how my cousins and tias and tios were like. That is so embedded in, like, that's how my mom raised me. Yeah. You know, I had in my Holy Communion, I sit up there in the pretty white dress, I read from the Bible, I had thousands of bobby pins in my hair, you know?
It wasn't necessarily because you wanted to. Yeah. It was more like it was pushed upon you because of tradition. Because it was so, my mom did it when she was a kid, and therefore I have to do it. And I didn't think twice about it. I never went to church and was like, I never second guessed it. I never asked why. I never asked how. I never asked, like, who do I? What did it mean to you? What did it mean to me? Who do I even believe in God? Yeah. And now that I'm 18 years old and figuring out who I want to be as a person, that is a huge thing, because believing in God is what makes like who you are. Yeah, it has to come from yourself before it can come from anyone else. Exactly. Which is like that entire, like what we just said is, I feel like the entire point of spirit restoration, where it's like you have to find it within yourself before anyone else can try and find it for you. You can't help other people if you yourself are broken. Exactly. So it just sucks that these institutionalized, like, big like congregations of church don't let you find that out for yourself. Exactly, because you're so pushed and almost forced into doing these things, and if I don't go, then I will have let my mom down, and then I feel bad. Yeah. But then I'm doing something that I don't know about. Yeah. And then I'm doing something that
should touch my spirit and should touch who I am.
Yes.
But it's not,
Yeah.
because it's affecting her so much, and I see how it's helping her and all these other people, and
Yeah.
how their spirits are being healed and restored.
And you don't see that for you.
And I don't see that for me, but it's like, I want to.
Yeah.
But I don't know how, because I've only been pushed on this
You've
one
never been
path.
taught how. They haven't given you the information
Exactly.
for you to like heal your own spirit, literally, like
And
spirit restoration.
Be who I want to be.
100%.
And I don't know. Now that I'm away from home, it's like I think that learning about this and ethnic studies is something that touched me, and I felt really like it hit close to home. Simple as I
Yeah.
hit close to home.
For sure.
And it's just me trying to figure out basically not even what I want to do with my life, but when I look in the mirror, who do I want to see?
Yeah.
When I hear myself talk, what do I want to hear?
Yeah.
You know?
And those are all things you have to find within yourself. And I feel like people who are unaware of ethnic studies don't necessarily like have that point of view where they can't have that self-reflection. And that, I feel like, because we're taking this class, and we've seen a lot of media in this class, right? So if you were to show a piece of media to someone who doesn't have that kind of insight on how to self-reflect, like what would be the documentary, the podcast, the reading that you read from this class, to give someone a glimpse into ethnic studies? What would that be for you?
I definitely think if I could only pull one piece of media
Yeah.
from what we've learned so far in the semester, so far from these just few weeks, I would show them the story of Brandon Martinez and the story of You Just Don't Know How Much He Meant by Lisa Caucho. That really hit me because it shows how poorly people who aren't involved in like the inner circle view like understand us,
Or the lack
our
of understanding.
culture,
Yeah.
who they think they think they understand, and they really don't.
They don't know.
And they're so fixated on what they believe and what they want to believe and what they want to believe is correct,
Yeah.
that they just can't see. They're in
Yeah.
a bubble. They're living in this form of life that just isn't correct. It isn't cohesive for everybody to just live their lives, and they try to implement it. And in this story, it's about, not to give too much since we all read it.
No, yeah.
We all heard it. We all know it.
But I mean, this story of him being like a lifeguard, right?
This story, well, he that's all he wanted to be.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted to be in life. It's simple, it's easy, and it doesn't seem successful, it doesn't seem crazy, but
No.
that's all he wanted to be. He wanted to sit on the beach and live his life, and when he died, everybody thought the worst of him.
Yeah, it made it much more grand than it had to be.
Everybody thought that he was doing bad things, that he died of drunk driving, and they didn't know the whole story. They simply just got so fixated on what they wanted to believe that they couldn't understand that he was just a simple guy who wanted to live a simple life.
Literally.
And be unbothered by society and society's expectations of him.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to society and how they have these unrealistic expectations or these false understandings of who he was as a person, we can see that in that story. That was only in the early 2000s. That was the year 2000, so it really wasn't that far. Which kind of brings us to our next question, which is in comparison to how we see society handle those in the stories, like discrimination and the marginalization that these people face, do you think, in your opinion, are there any noticeable reformations or changes that you see in current day as a result of the implementation of methods and information found in ethnic studies? The knowledge that we gain from it, do you think that's changed society in any way?
I think if we're going off of what our readings and that story simply, that I don't think it's changed much.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's changed much, but I don't necessarily think that it hasn't changed.
Okay.
So I think that people now are being more informed, that these issues are coming to the surface, and for society as a whole, that it's been brought up more. It's been talked about more. It's been talked about online, social media, in our classes.
Yeah.
It's been talked about in videos and books and podcasts, and that is good. But I don't think that there has been a solution.
Yeah.
I don't think that we've talked about these issues, but I don't think we've actually talked about a remedy to these problems.
Okay.
And I think that needs to be focused on more. It's like we've been focusing on these, we are bringing up issues from like decades ago. Like this has been happening over and over and over again. But I think the fact that this has been happening over and over and over again so much that it's just so deeply rooted in our educational system. It's so deeply rooted in society. It's so deeply rooted in our going to school and like seeing, you know, our friends, our lunches simply, something like that, or in social media or in social media, period. Like that is a huge part of people's lives nowadays in the 21st century, and that's how society's changed, but it's being talked about more in social media. It's not like it's being brought up just as much, but as I was saying before, the remedies aren't like there's no like light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and it definitely feels that way. And I mean, even though we've discussed like how practice-based research can kind of aid a community when it comes to like activism and sticking up for one another in a community, like at the end of the day, because these institutions are so large, it feels like we're fighting an endless battle that necessarily can never be won. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we've only, in these institutions, in these activism, in these classes, we've honestly only really talked about how to comfort each other. We've only talked about how to get over these problems.
How to endure, not how to fight back.
Exactly. Yeah. We need to figure out what we can say, what we can do, how we can change people's spirits. This is where spirits also come in, because in other people's cultures and other people's spirits, it's so people are doing this, people are being racist, people are being discriminatory without even realizing it. Like
100%.
And it's not like it's a microaggression, like these are aggressions, people just don't see it.
Outward aggressions,
like and it's sad to see how actually deeply rooted in society racism and discrimination really is when you look at the bigger picture and when you look at things as a whole.
100%. And I hope that like with like just all of that being said, I hope that what we can get out of this class is just finding ways to fight back and to just probably the number one thing I'd want to take from this class, I think we both want to take from this class, is how to implement the methods of ethnic studies and to not just endure, but to actually make a change, whether that be through implementation of policy or getting involved in student government. I think that that's the most important thing to do, not to just read about it, not to just research it, but to put it into action.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I definitely think this interview project was really eye-opening. Yeah, literally eye-opening. Did you have a couple more thoughts before we wrap up?
Honestly, I think I'm going to save it for the podcast.
100%.
Because that is going to be something that I'm excited for that. I'm excited to just chit-chat and just talk and just to get our feelings out and talk about issues.
All right. Well, thank you, Professor, for listening. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. And that's a wrap up. Bye-bye.